Welcome to Startup School with Startup Canada and CANARIE. Startup School is a program of Startup Canada Live, a webinar series dedicated to the professional development of Canada's entrepreneurs and community leaders. My name is Catherine Forrest, and I'm the Communications, Marketing, and Government Relations Manager here at Startup Canada. I'm your host for today, and I'll introduce our featured guest in just a few minutes. Today's Startup School topic is Building Your Business on the Cloud, presented by CANARIE, a nonprofit corporation that designs and delivers digital infrastructure to Canada's research, education, and innovation communities. Our featured guest today is Randy Jones. Randy is the Senior Director of Technology Innovation at CANARIE. Randy's expertise ranges from product management, development, and management in multiple sectors. Randy is joining us today to give his expertise on how you can successfully build your business on the cloud. We'll start today's session with a presentation from Randy and then open the floor for Q&A. All of our listeners and viewers can ask questions anytime in the YouTube comment section or by using the hashtag StartupSchool on Twitter. So without further ado, welcome to the program. Randy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm very happy to be here and able to reach out to startups across Canada. This is a great honor. So I'm going to just share a presentation here. There we go, and it's, as Catherine stated, building your business in the cloud. And what we're going to be talking about today is a brief introduction to CANARIE, who we are, what we do. We're going to go through a few of the trends that are driving cloud computing, and we're going to have an introduction to cloud computing for those that may not be familiar with some of the terminology or concepts. We're going to talk about cloud for business operations. So in other words, how you can exploit software as a service in the cloud to help run and build your business. And also for those in the audience that are part of the development community, we'll talk about some considerations you may want to think about when designing a product that runs in the cloud. And finally, last but not least, we'll talk about CANARIE's Digital Accelerator for Innovation and Research. This is a free cloud infrastructure as a service focused on development, test, and early commercialization of cloud products. So, who is CANARIE? Well, CANARIE's core purpose is to support development and adoption of digital technologies to accelerate innovation in the public and private sectors. As more Canadians adopt digital technologies, this is important for us to continue to have a strong economy and knowledge-based economy in Canada. So one of the ways that CANARIE does this is through our core digital asset, which is the National Research and Education Network, or NREN. If you went to university or college in Canada, you've probably used this network without really your knowledge. And what it is it's a 100 gigabit per second wide area network backbone that connects 13 regional networks off which universities, colleges, and research institutions connect. And it's through this network that various researchers collaborate, doing things like sharing data sets and information to further their projects. Also, on top of this network, CANARIE delivers really 4 other programs. One is an identity and access management program called the Canadian Access Federation, the DARE cloud computing platform. We also run the Research Data Canada, which is a new program started this year to further exploit data sets in Canada. A few other quick points about CANARIE. We started in '93. We have just over 30 staff members. We're a not-for-profit based in Ottawa. Okay, so enough about CANARIE for now, and we're gonna talk about the trends here. So Canada's economy is really shifting from a resource-based economy where traditionally we pull things out of the ground, harvest trees and agribusiness. And to really compete on the global stage, we need to really extend our internet economy and exploit more data-driven innovation. And it's been said that data is the new oil, and One thing about it might be a little less volatile than the current oil, where our economy moves all over the place with the price of oil. So we're moving more and more to exploiting data. And in this era of data-driven innovation, it's an interesting time. Cisco publishes an annual global cloud index based on what they're seeing in terms of data transit and in the internet, and they're forecasting that by 2019 there'll be 180 petabytes of data generated a day from a city of 1 million people. That's a lot of data, and I like to think that there's gold in that data for startups and technology entrepreneurs who are looking to exploit that business value. So by capturing this data, joining it from different sources, storing it, analyzing it, and predicting, future events based on the data, it's possible to improve and automate decision making, better understand how customers are using your products and services, and innovate those products and services as well as your processes and organization. So data is very important, and I've had the privilege over the last quarter or so to speak at almost 10 events, startup events recently, and I'm very impressed at the number of startups that are focusing explicitly on exploitation of data. It's great. And studies have shown that companies that exploit data are enjoying 4 times the revenue per employee, which is a key metric, than those of traditional ICT firms. So, value is shifting with respect to data from being just processing it, storing it, moving it around, to one where analytics and data-centric services are creating new business value. So what are some of the trends that are involved in this collection and analytics of data? Well, one is that storage of data in the cloud has become very inexpensive and dense, and you can get data storage, for example, in AWS. The Elastic Block Storage Service, for example, is 3 cents per gigabyte per month, which is very low, and for long-term archival storage, it even goes down further. So their Glacier service is 1 cent per gigabyte per month to store that data. Another trend is ubiquitous, high-speed, low-latency networking. So being able to access the data from any device, anywhere, is also a trend that's supporting our ability to exploit data. And lastly, the applications that have been developed over the last, I'd say 5, 6 to 10 years, allow us to contextualize our personal and business lives and really exploit data. And underpinning all of this is cloud computing. It's really the glue that pulls these things together and allows us to exploit it for business. So you might ask, what can the cloud do for my business? Well, it really allows you to focus on what matters, and that is creating business value for your chosen market or set of customers, rather than building out infrastructure. So with cloud, it's really changed the dynamics of new entrants into a market. So the barriers have really come down. It allows people to access services anywhere on the planet from just about any device, and it allows you to scale your business globally. So it's really interesting that you can have a small micro business just about anywhere in Canada, but through the internet access customers globally. It's very powerful, and not having to focus on infrastructure is great. I can think back about a decade ago. I worked for a company. We developed authentication and authorization systems for the mobile data services market, and we were a sizable company serving the tier 1 markets in the U.S. and we would spend about 60 to 70% of our R&D budget just on building out infrastructure. So relatively boring stuff like synchronizing databases across regions. And now you really don't need to build that. You can just lease it from cloud service providers. So it's very powerful. So what is the cloud? So this is just some basic concepts of cloud. It's really on-demand compute, network, and storage, whereby you can through a portal or through a application program interface, turn on server capacity, add to it, reduce it, move it around, and do this very rapidly. Unlike traditional IT, where you have to buy hardware and then install it and get it going, which can take weeks to months for a new server. With virtual servers in the cloud, it really takes seconds to minutes to get a new server running. And one of the biggest innovations with cloud computing is it's a utility-based monetization scheme in most cases. So you only pay for what you use. And it really has changed the dynamics, whereby in the past you would have to capitalize infrastructure, so buy servers, buy disks, buy network equipment. Now you don't have to put that money up front. You really just pay for it as you use it. So at the end of each month, you'll get a bill for what you used. And there are three main computing models in cloud computing. We'll just go through those quickly and use a house analogy to describe them. So if building software is in a way like building a house, cloud infrastructure as a service is the foundation. So it's a basic hardware layer with virtualization technology on it. So virtualization technology allows multiple tenants to share the same hardware, and a cloud management platform that manages all those resources and ensures that there's fairness of use. But if you're building a house, a foundation is really just a start, and that's true if you're building software as well. Infrastructure as a service is the bare minimum. It's usually an operating system running on a virtual server. If you're building an application, you really have to write or integrate all the software above that base. So next would come platform as a service, and sticking with the house analogy here, platform as a service adds reusable software frameworks and modules that can be rapidly put together to build an application. And these are things like load balancing as a service, database as a service, or content distribution services. These allow you to build an application faster than if you're just using infrastructure as a service. However, you do pay for each one of these, so there's a usage fee for each platform as a service. So if you're an application developer, you'll need to consider those fees when you use these. And yeah, as I say, like building a house with these reusable prefab modules, you can get there sooner. And then lastly, there's software as a service. So if you don't want to own a house, you can just rent one, and that's true of software. So in the old days, in the prior days, I should say, we would buy software and deploy it on premise and capitalize it up front. But nowadays, you merely subscribe to software services and pay for that as you use it. So having introduced software as a service, let's talk a little bit about how you can exploit software as a service for your startup. And I've categorized software as a service into 6 main categories. And I should say that there are tens of thousands of software services available globally, and 6 categories is probably a little light. You could decompose these into many subcategories, but for our purposes, we're going to talk about financial management services, customer management services, marketing services, IT, project management, HR, and staff administrative services. And it's interesting to consider when you might want to deploy software as a service in your business. So I've come up with a very simple model here of 3 stages in the maturity of a startup. Starting with early stage, where you may have an idea and a partner or not, but you don't have customers at that point. You're really building a minimally viable product, or you're testing your idea in a market, but it's early. You don't have revenue, and then you may get some revenue, an early customer, and sort of be a micro business, say up to a $500,000 a year in revenue, and then beyond that, as you're scaling to a broader market, you're capturing more and more customers. You're sort of in the small business range, up over $1 million plus. So obviously, you don't need all of these software as a service in each of these 3 stages, and it's important to consider when you might need them. So at the early stages, you do need some IT services. Obviously, you need communication like email. You need some document management and creation and storage services, backups. You may also wish to have some collaboration services if you have a partner and you're dispersed, or you're not sort of cohabitating in one office. And then as you move forward and you start to engage customers, maybe your first customer, or you're building out your reach to the market through channels, you're going to incur some expenses. It's very important to think about some financial management services, things that would allow you to capture expenses and maintain proper books, as well as issue invoices and establish accounts receivables and payables. You'll need all that to be able to prepare tax returns and really to run your business, frankly, to understand, when you'll be profitable, do cash flow forecasts. Now, as you've proven your product or service in the early market or with some early customers, you may wish to expand, and there's a number of marketing related tools there and software as a service you'll want to consider. Everything from social media channels to spread the word, to marketing automation, things that allow you to structure campaigns and measure the effectiveness of those campaigns, as well as e-commerce sites if you're selling goods online, if you have an online storefront. As things mature in your business and are going well, you'll hopefully be capturing more and more customers, and keeping the customer relationship clear is in the area of customer management, and building a sales pipeline and being able to advance each opportunity through a life cycle. So there's lots of great customer relationship management software. As well, when you have customers, the great thing is you have customers who pay and customers who need support. So in that customer management area, you can include support systems, the ability to track any issues that they're having and resolve them quickly. Also, with multiple customers comes multiple staff members, and it's really hard to find good talent and build your business with them. So in the HR and staff admin category, there are a number of good recruitment tools online that allow you to advertise positions, intake applicants, and run them through the life cycle. And additionally, in that area, a whole category of payroll services is important, because there are a number of fairly strict regulatory requirements that you need to conform to ensure that people are being paid correct amounts at the correct time, that you're withholding and remitting tax, EI, and CPP in conformance with all the rules that we have here in Canada. Assuming you're doing all this well and you've advanced into the small business stage, the size of your customer engagements may grow. Bigger deals, and deals that require a lot more coordination, and the financial risk that comes with larger projects can present a threat to your business if not managed correctly. So project management tools are really critical to ensure that deliverables for large products are de-risked and that you're delivering efficiently with good margin. So having talked about some of the stages where you might look at these, and by the way, this is just one spin on a typical evolution of a startup. There are many different ways that you could lay this out that make sense for your business, but this is pretty typical. So let's talk about some examples. And by the way, I've got some examples in each of the categories here. As I mentioned earlier, there are literally tens of thousands of software as a service available. And I'm not endorsing by any means any one of these, but I've tried to pick ones that are very popular and work well in most cases. In the area of IT, we have Google Apps for Work, so you can set up your corporate email and document management and storage and collaboration tools. Microsoft Office 365 is obviously in that zone as well. For backup of documents or other assets, there's services like Box, Ignite, and Dropbox for Business. These are all fairly good for that. And in terms of conferencing, Zoom as an example is one of many where you can have very lightweight video and audio conferencing. In the financial management zone or category, we have Intuit QuickBooks Online, which is an evolution of their long-standing desktop software offering. It's a pretty full-featured accounting package. FreshBooks is another one. It's a Canadian company based out of Toronto. They have a really awesome online accounting service as well. Very well focused to rapid invoice generation and collection on that. So if you're running a small business with a large number of smaller invoices, it's really well suited to it. And then there's many others. I've just listed a couple here. Xero and Sage, which is very big in the construction business, Sage 1. From a marketing perspective, well, I'm sure you recognize Twitter and Facebook as social media channels. Shopify, another great Canadian success story where you can, from various libraries and templates, build a very strong professional online e-commerce presence. And in the area of marketing automation, HubSpot and Infusionsoft can help out as well. In customer management category, we have Salesforce.com, which is really the standard for CRM going back a decade now. And it scales very well from small to large organization, has many add-ons to cover beyond just basic CRM. And there's others in this area, Zoho, Teamgate, and Sugar. In the HR and staff admin category, we have Nethris, which is a Canadian payment service, CGI, which is a giant in the software professional services business, owns and runs Nethris. ADP as well has been around in the payment business for a very long time, and they have a cloud version for small business. And in the area of recruitment, Workable and iSIMS are two services to consider. And then the last category, Basecamp, is a great collaboration tool for dispersed teams and also, closely working between a customer and your business. Confluence is a sort of a wiki on steroids, which allows you to again collaborate in a very creative way with your customers within the construct of a project, as is Active Collab. So these are just some examples. As I say, there are thousands out there, and picking SaaS services for your business is not a trivial thing if you want to do it in an informed manner. And there are thankfully a number of tools that you can exploit to help here. In the area of sort of directory and selection tools, there's getapp.com, selecthub.com, and Capterra. And each of these allows you to go in and browse through their directory of services and filter on the things that matter for you, because in many cases SaaS services are targeted towards a particular market segment, and you want to see if you can find services that are aligned to your particular type of business. But there's more to this than just selecting a service. You really want to make sure the service is reputable and has legs. And one thing you can do is you can go to montclair.com. It's a site that I've just recently become aware of, and they publish the top 250 global SaaS around the world, and they give a ranking to each of those. So if you want to understand if a given service is a player in the global market, you may want to go look it up there. And last but not least is your network. I mean, collaborate with your peers when you're going to networking events and startup events. See what's working for other members of your community, and also what's not working, and use that to help inform the decisions you make when selecting SaaS. So I have a couple other tips. So it's worthwhile considering picking proven services. There's safety in numbers here in the herd, because frankly, attrition with software as a service can be quite high. The barriers to entry to launching a new SaaS are low, and therefore we see a lot of them emerging. If they fail to achieve market traction, they're not going to be around long. And you need to understand when you pick a service if it's going to be around for as long as you need it to be, because it can be very distracting if a service you're dependent on goes offline. You could lose your data, or you could have a major interruption to your operations. It's also worth considering the timeline over which you'll be scaling and picking services that can scale, because many services focus on specific market segments. There's those that focus on small business and those that focus on Fortune 500. And picking a service that can scale with you may be a consideration, because switching costs can be quite disruptive to you. You're going to spend time, effort, and possibly money switching from one service as another. So you want to minimize the number of times you have to switch services. And I would suggest that cost should not be the primary criteria or consideration when picking services. It's always a consideration. You don't want to overpay for something, but free is, in many cases, not a sustainable business model. So you need to pay for real business value in what you're getting, unless you're willing to take the risk that the free services you're using may not be available to you when you need them in a few months. So you shouldn't overpay for services, obviously, but chasing free services can be not the best approach. And I could put a picture here, but it might be slightly distracting. But while it's easy for me to sit here and talk about all the selection criteria and considerations you may have, the thing is, you have to run a business and build your business. Don't really get too distracted by picking your software services. Set a selection time budget and criteria that you can live with, and so that you can pick these services and get on with building your business. So that's our talk around software as a service and picking softwares to help build your business. And now we're going to talk a little bit about cloud for product development. So we talked about earlier the three main cloud computing models. And it's interesting to consider, when you would use one versus another. And in particular, platform as a service versus infrastructure as a service. If your biggest concern is time to market, so to build your minimally viable product and get it out there and test it with early customers, Platform as a service is definitely going to get you there faster than infrastructure as a service, simply because you don't have to spend so much labor and time integrating other software packages or writing software components from scratch. However, if service costs are a big part of your concerns, platform as a service is going to have a much higher cost for you down the road when you're in a production environment than infrastructure as a service, and that's because you pay a usage fee for many of the platform services you'd be using. So consider this. Let's say you're working with some students on your team, and they're developing software, and your student, with all best intentions, decides to use a platform service in the work he's doing, and you don't have a good visibility or control of that. While the student may have done this to save time on his timeline, they may have saved 2 or 3 days of work. That platform service down the road could cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars a month in usage fees to pay for that. So it's really good to pay attention to, if I could use the term, your software bill of materials, to understand all the platform services that are going into your solution, and what those costs will be as you scale to the market you're chasing with your product or service. And then there's vendor lock-in. So with cloud services, and particularly platform services, there are no strong standards in the industry yet for the platform services. All of the big commercial service providers like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google all have very strong platform services that will allow you to get to markets sooner. But as you use these, and the more of these that you use, the more you get locked into that vendor's wares, and your switching costs, if you needed to switch, will become higher. So it's worth considering how locked in you are to a given vendor. And speaking more about lock-in, a very important topic these days is automation. So cloud computing, and one of the big benefits of cloud computing is its ability to dynamically scale up to serve a large offered load, or to scale down and save costs for a smaller load. So we have these pay-for-use services, and it's really hard to profile and understand how much it's going to cost to run your infrastructure for a given offered load. And furthermore, you need to write some software to control how you horizontally scale the resources, how you build clusters of servers, or how you scale storage out and in. And so you're going to be writing and spending time characterizing this, and the more you're doing this, you're using the cloud service providers' application programmer interfaces. And these APIs, again, are not standardized across all the big production cloud service providers. So the more you develop automation, the more you are locking into a service provider. So it's important to understand, really how much you've locked in. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up to bill shock at the end of the day, or being totally locked in. Bill shock in the case where you don't have the automation to scale down your services that aren't being used, or lock in if you've written the automation. So I'm not suggesting that you should not develop automation code, but I'm really just suggesting that you pay attention to lock-in and know what it would take to move to another service provider. A couple of tips here. Minimize your dependency on platform services. I mean, use them by all means, but don't go crazy and use them all. Design for code portability. It's always important. Invest in automation to synchronize your images and your containers and your data between clouds. And when you can, profile resource consumption relative to offered load. This is important because it will help you understand how much your costs are going to look like at scale in production. And that's important because it will help you in understanding what your margins will look like and what sort of business you're going to have. And last but not least, you may want to also track market conditions, because the market in Canada is changing, and it's not just Canada, globally it's changing. But in Canada, there's been a lot of change in the cloud services market over the last 18 months or so. At CANARIE, we started the DARE infrastructure as a service in 2013, and one of the reasons that was started was because there were no commercial cloud vendors who guaranteed data sovereignty. So in other words, that the data you produce stayed in Canada. But things have really changed since 2013. We now have a number of great cloud service providers who have emerged. So RO, Cloud A, Internap, HostedBiz, these are all examples. IBM's SoftLayer offering is now in Canada. And over the last year and a bit, Microsoft, DigitalOcean, and Amazon have all announced and or opened their data centers, and they're running. DigitalOcean, as an example, is a cost leader in infrastructure as a service. You can get a virtual server instance for, I believe it's $5 a month for a small server. It's really quite compelling. We track the cost of cloud services in Canada, and we think it's entering a competitive phase. Right now, the average price for an instance is about $57 a month. So this would be an instance with one virtual CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, some storage, and about 5 terabytes of data transfer out per month. But we think that with this hyper-competitive phase, that things are going to drop. We believe that prices over the next 18 months to 2 years will come down to around $10 a month for that same sort of virtual instance. So this is why it's in somewhat ways important to understand your lock-in to a given cloud provider, because if you're locked into a price laggard, you may be incurring costs you don't need to, and you may want to consider moving to a lower cost service provider. And that brings me to CANARIE's cloud. So as part of CANARIE's mandate for supporting private sector innovation, CANARIE decided in 2013 to build a cloud infrastructure service on top of its core asset, our NREN. And it's focused specifically on helping Canada's startups build products and get to market faster, and do it in a way where the data stays in Canada if that's important to you, like solutions that are targeting government and or healthcare quite often have fairly strong requirements that the data have a known and Canadian resident location. So the DARE cloud is for Canadian startups to develop, test, and do early commercialization work as they build out their business. The eligibility to use the DARE cloud is relatively simple. You need an office in Canada, like this road we see here, and less than 500 employees, which for most startups is a very large number. And you need to agree to our acceptable use policy, which really means you agree not to use the cloud to break any laws or to do other nefarious acts like spamming. So why would you consider using the DARE cloud? Well, it's free. It's free for 1 year And our fondest hopes after that year is that you've met with success and you have revenue and are ready to move on to commercial cloud. You also can gain experience with cloud. If you've not used cloud technology, it's a safe place to do it without incurring any costs. And it's also a very flexible environment where you can engage your early customers, again, with no costs, and refine your business models and incorporate their feedback into your product. So there's really no hidden costs. You get to use this cloud for 1 year, and it's renewable for a second year if we have space in our cloud. Your data always stays in Canada with the DARE cloud, and we have a very high performance network. As I mentioned, it's a 100 gigabits per second national network. We have 2 data centers, one in Edmonton and one in Sherbrooke, Quebec, that house our infrastructure. To this date, over 700 startups have used the DARE cloud, and we've had some very happy experiences with helping startups get to market and prove their products and services. And we have many case studies online if you'd like to look at them at canarie.ca/cloud/case studies. And the types of businesses that are using our cloud is quite diverse. We have everything from forestry management to mobile security applications to public safety applications to social media. There's really no limit to the creativity that we're seeing with respect to the DARE users. So what do you get with the DARE cloud? Well, free for a year. You can develop, test, and trial your products there. You get 4 virtual machines within a quota. So you get a quota which has 4 virtual CPUs, 4 virtual machines, a total of 8 gigabytes of RAM, 80 gigabytes of storage across 4 file systems, 200 gigabytes of object storage. We have many operating system images that you can select to use, including Windows servers, and we pay for those licenses as well. So if it's a Windows Server 2012, for example, you can spin up virtual machines with that, and we pay for those licenses. There are never any data transfer fees associated with DARE. Whether you're transferring data into our cloud or out of it, there are no fees. We do provide support during business hours. We provide email support. If you send us an email, we'll normally get back to you within an hour, and it's in the area of support where we differ from commercial cloud providers. We do not provide service level guarantees, but we do provide very good support. And if you need more resources, you can buy them for nominal fees. So for example, this quota that is being shown here, you can double that quota for $400 a year, which is well below the market price. This amount of quota would cost you about $2,500 on a typical commercial service per year. And we've just recently added graphic processor units to our infrastructure. So those are available for those of you who may be developing applications that are dependent on graphics processor units like games or data visualization applications. So how do you sign up for the DARE cloud? It's very simple. You go to canarie.ca/cloud. At that page, you'll find a button, Apply to DARE. If you click that button, you'll go to a form. You provide some contact information and read our acceptable use policy and submit. And we will normally review that application, and if accepted into the DARE program, you'll receive an email with your login information within a day or two, and you'll be able to start using the cloud at that point. So a number of questions I often get asked about the Dare Cloud. What happens after the year of free use? Well, you can simply reapply to the program, and if there's capacity and you remain eligible, you can be you get an extra year to use the service. And another good question is, what happens or what's involved in migrating my software into the Dare Cloud and out of the Dare Cloud? And it's a good question because it takes effort and duration to do that. And moving assets between clouds is becoming more and more a common activity for software developers. One way to do this is you simply take a snapshot of a running virtual machine, download it out of a cloud, convert it to a different format if needed, and then upload it into another cloud. In the case of data, you can synchronize data volumes between clouds using a utility called rsync. That's one way of doing it. But it also, if you're serious about having support in multiple clouds and you're a developer, I would encourage you to look into using container technology that really further isolates you from any given cloud vendor. It's very powerful technology. So how does CANARIE define production use? And before I answer that, I want to make it very clear to the audience that CANARIE's cloud is for development, test, and early commercialization. It is not for production use. The CANARIE cloud is to help startups get going, but once you've got going and you have some revenue, we would expect that you would pay for your own services on a commercial cloud. And we define production use as high volume service offers for money. It's okay if you're engaging early customers for trials and even paid trials on the CANARIE cloud, and we have many tenants on our cloud that do that. But if you were running, say, 1 million subscribers and collecting fees from them on the CANARIE cloud, that's production use, and we would detect that and ask you to migrate off our cloud if you were doing that. So what level of support is provided? It's email support during business hours. If you send an email off business hours, we'll quite often respond, but it's not guaranteed. And if you need more resources, as I mentioned earlier, you can purchase those for nominal fees, well below market price. And that is the end of the presentation. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'm hoping there's some questions that have come in.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Randy. I definitely learned a lot. We learned some awesome services like Dare and tools to help you choose the platform that's right for your business. So we'll be sharing those via Twitter. My colleague Rochelle is on Twitter right now, so she's sending those out to you. Just a reminder to our audience that you can submit your questions at any time using hashtag #StartupSchool on Twitter and by entering your question in the YouTube comment section. But I'll get started with a few questions, actually. So, Randy, how much on average should a young company expect to spend on a cloud service? I know it'll be different for different businesses, but is there a ballpark number that they could start with to start their search?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously it'll vary by service and the number of services that you use, but I'm finding for many SaaS in particular, it's $30 or actually under 30, $29 a month seems to be a very popular company fee. There's a large variation in how SaaS providers monetize as well. Quite often that's a user fee. It could be $5 a month per user as well. So it's hard to have one answer to that, but I would say that if you budgeted around $30 for a company per service and then multiply it by the number of services you used, you'd have a ballpark budget.
Awesome, that's good to know. Considering that as a startup cost is a good number to have for our new companies out there. Do you have any, are there typical roadblocks that entrepreneurs would face when they're starting their business on the cloud, right from choosing their cloud service to actually running their business through the cloud?
Well, I guess, yeah, there'd be many roadblocks that one could imagine happening. Security is always a big consideration, and depending on the nature of the business you're in and whether you're storing your customers' data in the cloud, you want to make sure you understand that data is going to be secure. And with cloud computing, security has always been one of the big objections to usage, particularly for larger enterprises. But the reality today is that cloud service providers really do provide excellent security controls. However, there's a dependency upon software developers to use those controls in an appropriate fashion. So it's really important, I think, for a business owner to ask questions around data security. Is the data secure at rest? Is it encrypted at rest? And as the data is being flowing in and out of their solution or in the service they're using, is it secure in flight as well? That's a big one. I think all customers would be concerned about data security.
And with these platforms, is it easy to get that information? Is it, can people go to their service, help sections and find that information, or is it a bit more difficult?
I think it's getting easier. Most support groups at a SaaS would be, happy to discuss security topics with you if you're considering using their service. And for infrastructure and platform as a service, there's a large number of security standards that have emerged over the last couple of years that they're using. For example, ISO 27001 and 2 is just one of many that, if you can ask these questions, are you compliant with standard X, Y, and Z? And most of them, especially the big commercial service providers, publish on their page a set of security standards that they're compliant with. So it's getting easier, but that's kind of the nature of the question.
Right, excellent. And in these the resources that you provided earlier to help entrepreneurs actually choose the platform that's best for them, is security factored into those comparisons?
I don't actually have anything in this deck. If you were to send it out, I'm sorry. But yes, I think security is a big thing to ask about.
Yeah, certainly. Okay. And do you have any insights on what types of startups are best suited to build their business on the cloud? You talked about a range of platforms that a lot of entrepreneurs are already using, but when they're considering the startup costs and the cost it'll take them to get on the cloud, do you suggest that certain businesses avoid it for the first few stages of business, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. My thoughts on that are related to what you consider to be your accessible market or your total accessible market. I think any time where you're looking to address a very geographically dispersed market and your offering does not require a lot of face-to-face interaction with your end customer, so maybe more of a commodity that you're offering. I think cloud as a platform is a great one to build your offering upon. So I think that's one consideration. Conversely, if your offering requires a lot of personal face time with your customers and sort of more of a real-time professional service, it's obviously maybe less likely a good candidate to build onto the cloud. But of course, running your business in the cloud, I don't really see any barriers to that, unless you're running a business which is at its core, requires that you have complete control of all data. Because sometimes within the cloud, you may not know where your data is stored. It's just the nature of the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. My next question is actually reverts back to something that you were discussing earlier on transitioning between cloud services. So I think you touched on it, but could you perhaps recap for us, how you know when it's time for you to transition from a free cloud service to a paid cloud service, and what kind of support there is available to help a new entrepreneur who is new to the cloud and might not know about some of the nuances and back end parts of it, and how they are helped to make that transition.
Yeah, well, I may answer this in an indirect way. One thing for some of the audience to consider is the programs that the large commercial cloud providers offer. So in the case of IBM, they have a global entrepreneur program where you get credits for use of their cloud services up to a point, and they're trying to do things that are similar to CANARIE, build and enable startups to build larger businesses, which can pay at a later time. Microsoft as well, in their BizSpark program, has a similar offering, and you can, I think, in both of those programs, you can get up to $120,000 worth of credits across a year to build out. Now, I don't know all of the criteria to meet that level of credit, but there are different tiers of credit that they'll grant, and once you're in those programs, they I think encourage you to move from a free level, because you have, if you've had success in business and you have lots of customers, and some of your customers need support, sometimes that support, you will be dependent on your service provider to help you with that, and there are costs associated with that, and you want to be ensuring you're in good standing with your cloud service provider, that you're paying for their services and they're willing to provide the support that you need to support your customers.
Excellent. So I will just send out another shout out to our viewers that you've got about 4 minutes left to submit any questions that you have, if you haven't had a chance to do so yet. But I'm going to move things along here with Randy. So Randy, we discussed CANARIE, and when you started your presentation, you discussed some other resources we discussed DARE a bit earlier, but you also discussed some of the other resources that CANARIE has and programs that you have for entrepreneurs. So could you touch on those briefly, and just for our audience members out there, how else can they get engaged and use CANARIE?
Okay, sure. Well, there are a number of them, of programs. They may not all apply to startups, but I'll talk about one here. So the Canadian Access Federation is an identity and access management program. It's focused on furthering research and education in Canada. And it's, among other things, it has a federated single sign-on service. And let's say you're a startup and you're targeting the higher ed market with your solution. One of the characteristics of the federated single sign-on is it allows identity providers at each university to be used to authenticate users to access a service. So if you're developing a service, a software service that you wish to offer to the higher ed community, you may want to consider joining the Canadian Access Federation. It's free to join as a service provider, and you need to integrate a couple of protocols into your stack. But as a service provider, what it does is it frees you from having to do user account management. That is delegated to the home users institutions, so where the students, faculty, or staff are homed into, that's where authentication occurs. So this is a great way to access the Canadian higher ed market.
Excellent. Sorry, were you going to go on?
Well, no, I think that's it for.
Okay, perfect. So we've got time for one last question, and this one is coming to us from YouTube. We've got a question that asks, can cloud services be useful for a company similar to mine? I'm a seamstress and clothing creation specialist.
Yeah, well, I think so. Depending on the nature of your clothing, to the extent that, if you create clothing that you thought you could mass produce and distribute widely through parcel delivery. Setting up an e-commerce site on something like Shopify, as an example, would be a great way to access a broad market, really anywhere on the planet.
Excellent. Okay. We're more than happy to connect to anyone else who has questions to Randy directly. You can send us a note on Twitter or continue using the YouTube comments section. But we do have to wrap things up. So I'm going to say thank you so much to Randy for spending time with us today and for being our valued guest on the 6th edition of Startup Canada Live. To everyone who joined us today, all of the entrepreneurs, startup community leaders, and members, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you join us for the next installment of Startup School with TrueShield Insurance, when we'll be learning about managing risk and protecting your advice. You can also tune in to Startup Chat this Wednesday, when we'll be talking about CEO skills for entrepreneurs. You can also join us on Friday for another Startup Chats on how to get the recognition your startup deserves. And last but not least, be sure to nominate yourself or someone you know for the Startup Canada Awards before July 20th. That's our deadline. We're celebrating Canada's movers, shakers, and innovators with 16 unique awards, and you can apply for those at startupaward.ca. You're also invited to stay informed of all the latest opportunities, announcements, and entrepreneur events by following Startup Canada on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and following us on Google+ and LinkedIn. And again, a reminder to everyone, if you have any further questions, we're more than happy to connect you directly with Randy. You can find a recap of this presentation on YouTube later today. And that's all. We'll see you next time.